My guest tonight, Gare Allen, is going to be talking about law enforcement and the paranormal. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everyone. How is everybody today? I hope you said great. I'm great too. My name is Charlotte, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour. And this is the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team radio show. We call it California Haunts Radio for short. I'm also, speaking of which, I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have any kind of paranormal thing going on in your house, or you think you do, we can get to you. Because I got somebody in almost every county. So that's a plus, right? Or even if we're further away, we can get to you. So do that. You can do that at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com or CaliforniaHaunts.org, or even on Facebook, you can find me and find California Haunts. Anyhow, with that being said, wow, winded. No. If you're watching from Facebook tonight, please hit that follow button if you like what you see, because the more the merrier. We love having people follow us and keep an eye on what we're doing. If you're watching from YouTube, same thing. Please hit that little, well, not hit it, but click on, poor little ghost. The little ghost down the bottom right-hand corner with the Sherlock Holmes hat on and the magnifying glass. That's our mascot, and that will subscribe you to our channel. And on our channel is more than 350 videos in their different topics. I'm a journalist, photojournalist, and let me get my little button pushed. There we go. My button. Okay. And read something real quick. Cool. I was just reading something. I'm a journalist, photojournalist, and I like to vary my topics. I don't like to cover paranormal stuff all the time. So you're going to find stuff on abuse, spousal abuse. You're going to find stuff on maybe you're into eating bugs. You'll find stuff like that on there. So I like to vary it a lot. So I think there's a little something for everybody's taste on that page. Okay? Anyway, tonight's topic. Now, of course, I'm a paranormal investigator. When you're a young paranormal investigator, all you want to do is watch paranormal shows on TV. I mean, that's it. You just watch them. I was the same. 25 years ago, that's what I did. I sat there. I started out with things like In Search of, shows like that. And later on, when the group first started, it was just us and it was just ghost hunters. That was it. That was the show, was ghost hunters. So we all, Wednesday nights, that's where we'd be watching ghost hunters, right? Anyway, as things progressed, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and all those other shows came out. But I didn't like them. I don't like TV shows, per se. I figure I get enough of that stuff, ghost hunting in the field. But there's only 2 that I watch now, out of all the stuff that's on the air, other than like the Alaskan Triangle, right? There's only 2 other paranormal shows that I watch. One of them is Paranormal 911, and the other one is Haunted Hospitals. Why? Because I'm a newspaper reporter. That's what I do. And I've been around police officers, and I've been around firemen, and I've been around nurses because of my health problems, plus taking care of my family. I've been around enough nurses and doctors to know that if anybody is going to report something credibly, it's going to be somebody either in the hospital field, paranormal field, hospital field, law enforcement field, fire department, emergency personnel fields, right? Because they're trained observers. I'm not saying that, the regular client's not trained or anything like that. That's far from what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that, to me, hearing it coming from law enforcement, so somebody in law enforcement or, a related field is very, very incredible. It's a very credible thing because they are trained observers, just like newspaper reporters and other reporters, TV, believe it or not, okay? TV reporters, right? Reporters are trained to be observant. That's what we do. So that's why I put so much creed into shows like Paranormal 911 and Haunted Hospitals. So my guest tonight, I want to let him tell you about himself. Has some books, and he also talks about the law enforcement and paranormal, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And we'll talk about his books as well. Because I just think it's fascinating when someone in law enforcement sees stuff, and they talk about it. Because, they're very, very trained to think logically. And it's just fascinating when they tell stories. All right? Well, let me bring him on, and he can introduce himself. And here we go. Good evening.
Hi, Charlotte. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Tell everybody about you, sir.
Technology.
Isn't this great though? I mean, I can be at my house in California. You can be at your house. You know, we can chit chat back and forth.
I love it. It is. It's such a different world now. And back when we were, well, I think I'm older than you, but back when I was a kid anyway, that somebody said, oh, someday you'll be able to see the people you're talking to, like on the Jetsons. And, it was like, oh, yeah, and then we'll have flying cars and all the other stuff. But here we are.
That's right. It's getting closer to flying cars, too. So tell me about you, Mr. Allen.
So my name is Gare Allen. I'm born and raised in Tampa, Florida, where I still reside. Most of my family is here. My parents were from the north. They moved down here for most of the reasons people move down from the north of Florida, to get away from the cold, and they never looked back.
Right.
So when I was 12 years old, I had my first paranormal experience, and it terrified me. And when I entered my early or mid 20s, on a whim, I turned into a plaza where there was a metaphysical bookstore. Don't ask me why. I walked in and I couldn't get enough. I devoured all the books on reincarnation and psychic abilities, and I just kept going from there. And I'd always had a passion to write, but to be honest with you, I really didn't think I'd lived enough life to write about, because when people ask me what genre I write paranormal, but I write about life. I have a lot of different books out there. Now, paranormal is probably more popular, so that's what I'm known for. Mm-hmm. But I write about life, and like you were talking about, there's so many things in the world to talk about on a podcast, right? You don't limit it to just one area. You're into the paranormal, but there's life out there, and that includes a lot of different things. So when I was I'm 53 now, so when I was in my early 40s, I bought a house back in 1999. And it turned out to be haunted. And I said, okay, so this is going to keep going. And I loved it. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't. And so I started to put pen to paper and just started to say, okay, I need to write down these experiences. And I kind of wanted to say, here's what happened to me. And people have experiences. They don't know how to explain it, but they want to explain it. And so I had some ideas, having studied metaphysics at an early age in my 20s, and really devouring books, going to workshops, working with psychics, attending channeling sessions. And again, not that I have all the answers to everything, but I do have a perspective that I can share that might fit with somebody else's beliefs and help them kind of understand what might be going on. And so here we are now. And my latest book series is called Ghost Crimes. And that's what we want to talk about today. And it's specifically focused on our first responders experiencing the paranormal out there.
I think, like I said in the beginning, there's a lot of credibility there, because they're not going to lie. There's trained observers. I mean, in fact, the police, the first responders might be a little bit afraid to even report this stuff in, because they might get labeled as being kind of, crazy.
Yeah, nobody wanted to be, the spooky Mulder of The Office, back in the 80s or 90s when, they went to a call and there was something paranormal or just unexplainable. And the other part of that is, I've talked to several police officers who say they show up and there was a complaint of, domestic abuse, and one of the people in the house were physically abused, and they're saying it, something invisible did it to me. And of course, they're protecting the one that did it, the other one's making them lie. You can't chalk everything up to a ghost. And so when I heard that, it's like, that's where the title Ghost Crimes came from. It was like, people commit crimes, ghosts don't commit crimes. And I'm like, well, actually, I think they can, and they do to a point, or it does happen. I mean, I have like I said, I bought a house that was haunted, but I'll call it, well, it was a mild haunting with a very, terrible aspect that was quickly resolved. But there's both ends of the spectrums. I don't know if you want to call them ghosts, and then the other side is demons. But yeah, you're right. Nobody wanted to go out there and say I saw a ghost, because people roll their eyes, and it takes away your credibility, right?
Right.
Right. And you don't want that, because you want to continue to move up. But even today, when I was, I put out a post on my website and said, hey, share your stories with me. If you're a first responder, I'll keep you anonymous. And once the first story came out, they were like, oh, that felt good to share it. And then here's something else that happened. And here's another time. And my partner told me about a time this happened. And it was like, wow, the floodgates kind of open. And I think it might be therapeutic to kind of finally say, okay, I'm telling somebody who doesn't think I'm crazy that this happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that goes back to my next question. Have you talked to anybody in person about any of these stories, or has it all been online?
No, it's all been online. So, I mean, I have met And I was that guy. If I met somebody that happened to be a first responder, I would say, have you ever seen a ghost? And it was probably the most ridiculous. They're probably like, who is this guy? And it was, I just don't do that anymore. It's out of left field, first of all. And especially if there's other people there, they're not in a comfortable environment to say anything about it. Right. So no, I got everything online and that's fine. There was one on the phone. That was fine too. A couple texts, direct messages, that sort of thing. But no, nobody in person. And honestly, it's just, they just want to say, hey, here's what happened, keep my name out of it. But, and they ask, have you heard of this before? And what was it? So they're, looking for that resolution of, what do you make of it kind of thing? Because they know they're not crazy, but they know that they saw what they saw. And, they just need to find some sort of reconciliation.
With you talking about, contacting these guys, it reminds me of 25 years ago when Ghost Hunter show first came out, and I was just starting to do this. And I remember because nobody was really, people were into it, but they were hiding that they were into it. And so when you'd meet people, they'd say, well, what are you doing? And you'd say, well, you start tap dancing around, and then all of a sudden it would come out and they'd say, oh, that's cool. But
it was the original guilty pleasure.
Yeah. So that's what it reminded me of. Yeah. So tell me, in the stuff you've done as far as getting the information, how frequent is it that police officers and first responders come in contact with stuff?
Most of them, it was a one-off, maybe two. There was one detective who had, and that's what the book is based on. It's based on this particular detective who is now retired, but he was very well respected, but he had a very difficult life, and he just started to encounter different paranormal situations, and they were pretty egregious. I mean, there was satanic cults involved and things like that. It wasn't light ghost story by any means, and he wanted to understand what was happening, but he wanted to look for the left brain secular explanation. And he ran across some pretty horrific things, and he did report some of it, and there was a bit of ridicule at some point in his career, but he finally moved past it, but it always stuck with him. And unfortunately, a lot of the ghost crimes, the things that he encountered did involve children or younger people. And he had loss early in his life, and so it kind of hit really close to home. A lot of horrific things happened, but he wasn't scared. He was dedicated to his job, and so he just kept going forward. But he was alone. He had lost his love of his life early on, couldn't move past that, so never connected with anybody else later in life. And unfortunately, became that sort of classic TV detective that's overweight and doesn't take care of himself, doesn't sleep, focused on the job, wears the same faded blue blazer every day, kind of guy. But one of the best detectives that ever walked the earth.
Where police are concerned too with this stuff is, I know, like in my city, you get a lot of guys patrolling alone. Are there any cases where there's two of them that are on patrol that see the same thing?
There was a story where two, they were actually EMTs, showed up, and they both witnessed a young boy being held, several feet off the ground, pinned against the wall by an unseen force. And one of them, turned and ran. The other one stood there, just not knowing what to do, frozen in terror, and had the foresight somehow to take the cross off his neck and run up and place it on the child. And he says he has no idea why he did it. It just, in that moment, it felt like the thing to do. And that's what he did. And immediately the child fell and the room cleared and everything had stopped. And so the partner did say, yes, I saw that, but did not want to discuss it any further. And, when you encroach upon somebody's belief system, whether it's breaking the rules of physics or whether it's acknowledging that evil exists,
right.
I don't know. I mean, everybody has their belief systems, and when some people are willing to kind of open them up and, bend with the wind and alter your beliefs as you see and experience things. And other people need to have those very defined boundaries. So it just depends on the kind of person you are in that respect.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, like you said, about them witnessing this stuff. considering what they witness anyway, even on a weekly basis. I mean, I don't I don't see any reason why they don't have stuff following them home and stuff. Because I mean, I'm sorry, Siri. Oh my gosh, that's never happened before. That's scary. His voice came out, and I thought, where's it coming from?
It's funny. I was just told that I have a new coworker coming to work next week, and her name's Alexa, and I'm like, oh no, that's just going to wreak havoc every time we're on a call or anything.
That's funny. That's funny. Where I was going with this now, Siri threw me off. Oh yeah, with what police officers see, during their careers, it surprises me that there's not a lot more reports of something coming home with them. You know what I mean? Because they're coming right out of the scene where these bodies are and stuff.
It's funny you say that, because I have a friend of mine. She's an author of, oh my gosh, well over 20 paranormal books. Her name's Joni Mayhan. And she is, I call her the ghost girl, because anywhere she goes, she brings the ghost home with her. And she'll say, oh, I brought home a ghost again. Or this time it's a little girl. And I brought home an older man this time. It started to happen to me. And I don't know if it's always happened or I just wasn't aware of it, but I really became aware of it now. And if I go somewhere like, a casino, or I was looking for new houses, and there was a house that was being sold and it was empty, and the two owners had passed away within the last 6 months. And I just knew something was going to happen. I felt like they didn't want me to buy the house. First of all, they were like, this is our house. You need to go. Now, whether it was me or just anybody, I don't know. And I remember coming home in the middle of the night. I got up to go to the bathroom, and I walked in the bathroom, and the towel on the counter flew across the bathroom. Didn't fall off. It flew. And I reached out to a friend of mine who is a modern day shaman. He does remote cleansings. And I didn't tell him anything else other than something's in here. And he said it was an elderly woman, and that's who I picked up in the house. And so it's okay. I brought home an elderly woman who just didn't want me to buy her house. But to your point, are they bringing home things that, are causing crimes, or they're influencing people, and they're dark. And that breaks my heart, because, I have a lot of respect for our first responders, our military, firefighters, police. These folks leave their house and they say, I'm going to put myself in danger for strangers today. Right. And they leave their families behind. And it's like, you got to be a special person to do that. So my hope and prayer is that those things don't follow them home. But, I thought about that, and if you bring something home and, maybe the household conditions get bad, or, there's some sort of addiction that comes to be, and that's with anybody, that has that, that has those things attached to them, and bring them home. And I do a sea salt holy water barrier. I know that sounds crazy, but I take holy water and sea salt. It's tried and true kind of thing. And I put it all around the house, the windows and doors. But even with that, if you get a mischievous ghost, they're not evil. They're just someone who passed over, who may be bored, or I don't know. So, holy water doesn't bother them because they're not evil, right? So They can still cross the threshold. But they're still going to take my keys, or, and hide my phone and make me late and that sort of thing. So that's frustrating. But I wrote a book called Haunted Tampa. And what it is it's haunted spots in Tampa and different stories from different people that live here in the city. And I wanted to write it. The stories have been told, and they're told on the ghost walks, down in our Ybor City. But I wanted to write it because I wanted to give back to the first responders. So all the proceeds to that book go to Wounded Warrior Project. And I've done it for years now. And it's on audiobook now. It's on paperback. It's on Kindle, but I give all the proceeds to them. And it's just my way of saying, hey, we appreciate you. And, especially our policemen have really been beat up, over the last several years, and they're out there trying to do the best they can. So I want to show that support. My hope was that if there was an author in every city in America, and they all did it with their city and gave back to that program, whether it's veterans or the police or sheriffs or whatever. Because I gave to the sheriff's canine unit for a while, or in Tampa PD. I kind of divvied it up between the different groups for a while. Anyway, my hope is that happens so we can give back to these folks.
That's fantastic. I'll remember to repeat that at the end so that people can get, excuse me, pick up the book. Because what I'll do at the end is I'll show your website and then tease the books and everything that you've written.
All right, thank you.
After we get done.
I appreciate it.
the story, that you've gotten from first responders that have really got your attention?
Um, there was one. It was a pretty long, involved story, but I'll condense it down as much as possible. But there was a 7-year veteran policewoman, and she had been called to the house because a man had entered a house where a couple was living, and he was threatening them, and so she showed up, and the man, gave in immediately, but he kept pointing to the woman and saying, she's the one that killed me. It was her. And she's like, okay, okay. And he was wearing a hospital gown, and he'd obviously had been in the hospital and just left there. And so she puts him in the car, and she goes and takes another statement or something, and she turns around and he's gone. He's not in the car. The door's not open. He's just no longer in the car. So she goes back to the hospital to try and figure out who this person is, and they finally figure out who he was, and he had died like early that morning, but he had been in a coma for several months. So she's like, okay, something else is going on here. So she goes back to the couple, and the woman admits that yes, she knew him. She used to date him. Several months ago, they were in a car accident because she had been drinking and driving. They got in a terrible accident on their own and hit a tree in the woods, and he was knocked out and put in a coma, and she was fine. But she put him in the driver's seat and played it off like he had been driving. And so, his ghost had come back, to sort of, try and make things right or get peace. And, of course, the family then got peace because they thought that he was, driving drunk, and that was not the case. And I thought, wow. So you got justice, and you have a family needing peace, and you've got somebody's reputation on the line. And there were just so many facets to that. And God loved this officer that said, there's more to this. And she probably had, your journalistic instincts to say, okay, there's something else here. Let's take it a step further. Let me dig a little more, and see what's up. And if you think about it, they wear a lot of hats, right? They got to be all these different things to get things wrapped up and close cases and that sort of thing. So that was super sad. But like I said, there was people don't get closure often. And I think that was a situation where closure was forced from the other side. And I thought that was a huge lesson.
That is huge. And I remember my mother, when she would go to the hospital, they had a special wing for the older people that had Alzheimer's and stuff, where they would keep them. And when they found out that I was a paranormal investigator, I had a couple nurses sit down with me. And they said, this place is active. And I said, well, what do you mean it's active? Well, there's 2 rooms over there. When no one's in there, we get calls for assistance out of those rooms. And she says,
wow.
and, you can think it's coincidence, she says, but it happens during the day, it happens at night. And I said, well, what do you think started? She said, well, at the time when we were shorthanded, there was a woman that was staying in that room, and she was forever on the call button trying to get, trying to get our attention. And then she passed away. So they think it's this woman that does that, and they'll see her wandering up and down the hallways.
Wow.
So you hear this stuff all the time with hospitals.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's funny. I've had so many paranormal, metaphysical experiences over the years. And yes, I, bought, for those of you who remember cassettes, back in the day, there were cassettes that you could buy, and, they later became CDs. But, they regressed you back into your subconscious and that sort of thing. And then astral projection, I tried that for a while. And so, yeah. And there's imagination and things like that. So again, when I write, I'm like, hey, here's what happened. If you have a great explanation that, it says it isn't paranormal, great, rock on. I'm down with that, but I haven't found one for many of my experiences, but I welcome the experiences. So that's maybe why I have so many. But I had a similar experience recently. Earlier in the year, I got a colonoscopy. And when I came out of it, there was a nurse just to the left of me, and she was waking me up. And she's like, Gare, time to get up, wake up, wake up. And there was another nurse at the foot of the bed, filling out some forms or typing on the computer. And she said, are you doing all right? And I said, yeah, I'm all right. And she's like, okay. She said, nurse, I think it was Benson was her name. I don't remember. I was groggy, but she said, Nurse Benson will take it from here. And I said, okay. And she walked away. And as if on cue, Nurse Benson came right over. And I said, wow, she was really nice. And she's like, who? I said, that nurse. And she's like, there's no other nurse here. And I'm like, I literally, and of course I told my family, like, of course you saw a ghost. I'm like, no, I really did. It wasn't a scary thing. It was like this very beautiful nurse, actually. I was like, okay. But I swear it happened. But, I don't know. They give you some crazy stuff there, too. So, again, I'm not going to rule out hallucination, but it played with reality very well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible, too. When you think about, let's say, law enforcement, like I said, sometimes they patrol together. Like out here, a lot of the time they're patrolling alone, and they have to check out these empty buildings and stuff like that. Did you get any stories about that? Somebody that was, say, in a building by themselves.
I had one where he had investigated a barn where the owner of the barn, in Florida, we have a lot of rural areas, and he had a couple acres, and there was a barn that, just had, chickens and, that sort of thing. But he was finding his chickens slaughtered every morning inside the barn. But the barn was locked and there was no entry, no break-in. And so it was always freezing in there, and here in Florida, it's not freezing. That's not a thing we do here. It's very hot. And so there was a cop that went out there and checked it out on his own. And he came back a couple different nights and said, because it was pretty far from the house, but he's like, I'll check on it as I'm driving by, I'll pop in, and just kind of keep an eye on the place kind of thing. So he saw it a couple times and he saw a light inside the barn, but there's no electricity in the barn. There were no candles, so he had a couple experiences like that. But what really terrified him, and it kind of goes back to what you talked about before, with someone going home with him. He got home one night and his two children came running up to him and crying and hugging him. And his wife was hysterical because they swore that there was a man in their room. And so, of course, he ran around looking so there was no one there. No windows were open, no doors were open, and there's nobody in the house. And, he tried to make sense of it. And one of the kids said, the man said to tell you to stay out of his barn. And wow. He was like, he never went back there. He said somebody else could go check it out. I want nothing to do with this barn anymore.
That's incredible. I was just thinking too about the one that I talked to here locally, and I remember him telling the EMT. And I remember him telling me that they had a call to 911. They went out to the house, and all that was in the house was this woman, but it was a male voice that had called. And it was creepy because as they were working with the woman, the room got really cold, and they didn't know why. And the guy felt like they were being watched. So eventually they took her out, but they never figured out where the phone call came from, even though it came from that address.
Yeah.
Or who made
there was a similar story where they showed the call came in that a woman was dead in her apartment, and it was a woman's voice. And they showed up, and the door to the apartment was slightly ajar. And so he pushed it open because the EMT and his partner was behind him. And he pushed open the door, and there was a woman standing to the left. She had like short brown hair and a yellow robe on. And she just pointed to the right where the stairs were. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, okay, so he ran up the stairs, and there lying on the floor was the woman with the brown hair and the yellow robe. And he went back downstairs. There was no one there. And not to sound like a cheesy horror flick, but the call came from within the house. And so mm-hmm. they never made sense of it. And it was just somebody reported it. And that's what they were, they just reported they found the body. They didn't report anything else.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that, and yeah, it's just, in fact, we had the gentleman on, was it last night? No, the night before about phantom messages. We were talking about that, like phone calls from the dead and things like that.
Yeah.
When you think about law enforcement, and the people the stories that you've seen, is there a common theme to all these stories, or are they all different in nature?
No, they're varied for sure. I mean, and I'd probably say 60 to 70% of the cases there was an aspect of drug abuse or someone living in very unhealthy and dark and depressing conditions, where I think darker spirits, feel comfortable. I kind of think of it as, it's like the paranormal or the dark spirit side is like, they're like bugs, right? And so if you keep your area, dark and dirty, they like that environment. So, but if you keep it clean and positive and white and all that, then it's not hospitable for them. You can still get them, But, it's like, so you keep a clean house, you're not going to see bugs very often, but they can go in there, but that's not their environment. There's not anything they need there, kind of thing. So I did hear a lot of that, and, a lot of addiction and things like that. Again, that just lowers your energy, and somebody can get in your ear spiritually, and get you angry, insert thoughts in your head. And if we were already in a bad mood or had a bad day, it's real easy to kind of, turn another corner or take it up another level. So I think it's just opportunity like that that kind of makes it happen. But, it's varied, and it didn't just happen in depressed areas too. It happened in, upper income areas as well.
When you talk about your experiences, and I just wonder about like some of these police officers and EMTs that they might have psychic abilities, not realize they have them. But once that happens, like an event happens, like you see something or you hear something, sometimes it opens up to even more. And
yeah. Well, I think if you're a first responder, I think you're already a compassionate individual for sure, that you're willing to, you're protecting people, and whether or not, you list that as the first reason why you're doing what you're doing, it's like you're doing it. And I can't imagine that, going home after saving people. I mean, I've seen them in action, and they have to assess the situation. They have to keep themselves safe. They have to keep the people safe. They have to follow protocol, and they have to act quickly. They have to make sure people are put in a ambulance, or statements are taken, or God forbid, chase people down or dodge bullets. I mean, they don't know what they're walking into, but they have to assess it, and they have to be so many things. And it's like, I just, I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. Like I said, it takes a very special person. So, I mean, you read a room and you read people, and so you're open, and like I said, compassionate and open. So in that respect, you're gonna be sensitive to everything, whether it's physical or non-physical, I think, in those cases.
What's the scariest one that you came across while you were getting ready to write your book?
Probably, I say scariest because anything that involves animals or children to me is horrific. I don't want to hear those things, but I hear those things. And I'm like, I don't want to hear this story, but I have to hear this story. And when you hear, oh my God, this one was awful. It's in the first book. And there's a child in a home, and he had gotten a puppy for his birthday, but he was very upset, and they couldn't figure out why. And he was sitting in his room, and he's just rocking in his room, and he's rocking back and forth with his hands around his knees and his head down between his knees. And he keeps saying the same thing over and over. He's saying upside down, upside down, upside down. And they have no idea what's wrong with him. And they leave him in the room, and it's on a second level. And he said he heard the mother screaming, and came back downstairs, and she looked outside and had seen that the new puppy had been put into the ground halfway upside down.
Ooh.
And at the same time heard noise upstairs, ran back upstairs to see the child throw himself out the window.
Oh my God.
And there was a lot of dark paraphernalia in the house that seemed to have been written on the hardwood floor that was beneath the carpet that they had put, that was there when they bought the house, so they didn't know it. And pentagrams and that sort of thing. So there was like a cult, otherworldly, supernatural aspect to it. And then there was also the child owned a Ouija board that they bought as a game, and he had played it, 2 weeks earlier, but he had played it at his birthday party as well. And so again, you're not saying all it happened, but the Ouija board, in my experience, is a portal. It opens, it lets things through. Yep. You're supposed to close it. I don't know if they go back in. I don't mess with them anymore, ever. I had my experience with the Ouija board. No, thank you. It was not positive. I want nothing to do with it. But that story was sad on many levels.
I can see that. Boy, I'm an animal lover, so that really gets me right in the heart.
Yeah. Now, again, feel bad for the boy, but I'm animals all the way.
I am too. My dad was like that too. And if we were watching a movie, and like even a disaster film, people got killed. If the dog got killed or the cat got killed, he was out of there.
At
That's
this
enough.
point, when I see, like, it was a movie called Dog that came out. I haven't seen it yet, and I said I can't watch it. I already know I can't watch it because even if they look at the dog wrong, I'll lose my mind. I'm like, no, I can't do it. But I worked in the pet industry for many years, and I worked with adoption groups, and I'm on my second generation of dogs, and they're all rescue dogs. But I worked with a group who, very interesting group here in Tampa called Lost Angels Animal Rescue, and they went to the shelter, and they wouldn't get the dogs that were perfectly adoptable, the little puppies, the white perfect looking dogs. They got the ones that were like the mixed breeds, the rough looking dogs, maybe they were 2 years old, 3 years old, 8 years old. They went after those dogs because they said somebody's going to get these other dogs, right? We're going to go after these other dogs. And I watched them adopt, 8 to 12 dogs every week outside of a pet store. And so I put together a book for them years ago called The Dogs of Lost Angels. And I think it's got 42 stories written by the pet parents who adopted dogs from them with tons of pictures. And again, all the proceeds, from the sales would go to the rescue group. And so I did that for them as well. And we generated some money for them back a few years ago. And again, my hope was that, every city had somebody who would do that for a rescue group in their city. And, of course, that money goes right back into taking care of those dogs.
That's fantastic. When you think about the law enforcement and whatnot, seeing stuff out, did you get any cases at all turn into you that were during the day? Because normally, when people think about ghosts, they only think about this at night. Going on at night. Was there any encounters during the day for these people, for these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it was probably 70% at night, but there were some cases during the day. And, you know, it's interesting. The one that sticks out of my mind was there was a horrific accident. Cars had piled up on a highway, and when one of the officers responded, a woman basically grabbed his arm as he got out of he pulled over, and she grabbed his arm and said, "You need to come help these people." And he's like, "Look, I gotta assess the situation. I gotta call for help, and I gotta see, stop traffic, because cars just keep running into each other." And she's like, "No, you need to come over here because there's two people that need help like right now." And she dragged her. This is broad daylight, and dragged him all the way to this car where there were two people in the car that were severely injured. And as he looked, she let go, and he looked in the car, and he turned around, and she was gone. And it was the same woman that was in the driver's seat. And that's a story that I was told, but I had heard variations of that over the years. That people will bring people to help other people or themselves, because they realize they've passed, or they're in shock and they just think, "Hey, I need help," and they don't even think. I don't know. Who knows what they're thinking? I don't know what your state of mind is, but if it's an accident and it's traumatic and it's quick, you may think you were thrown from your car, but the person in there needs help.
Right, right,
But
right.
that was in broad daylight, and that was crazy.
I find that kind of story interesting. There's a famous one up here off of Highway 50 by Placerville, and it doesn't involve law. Well, no, it doesn't involve law enforcement, but it involves a woman that would stand, or some they were driving through and saw this woman standing by the side of the road, waving people down, trying to get their attention. And when they finally went to pick the woman up, she wasn't there. But when they looked down, they saw a car crashed down, off this hill in the woods. And they go down, and this woman was in the car, and her baby was there, still alive.
Oh, wow.
And apparently she
Wow.
had crashed, and they figured it had been at least 2 or 3 days since she crashed.
Oh my gosh.
But they saw her standing on the side of the road. It's a famous story up here.
And I don't, we don't know what happens on the other side, because once we get there, we're kind of stuck there. Not a whole lot of people spend a lot of time on the other side. I think it's a few minutes and they come back, and it's usually a white light and that sort of thing. But I do know that in my metaphysical experiences and my teachings and in channeling sessions that, they need energy. Spirits need energy to manifest or to become aware to us, because this is a very dense, existence, and they're in a lighter state. So when they appear, for a moment, people are like, well, why do they appear and just disappear? It's like it took everything they had just to appear, and then they were just out of gas, kind of thing. And so it kind of makes sense. So you think about it, the energy it must have taken to manifest after just passing 2 days earlier and wave down cars, but we know what the adrenaline does for a person when they're in trouble. They can lift cars off, their children, right? You've heard those stories. They lifted,
Right.
Cars out. So that's
Yep.
interesting.
One of my people in the chat room says, yeah, she lived just west of Placerville when this happened back in 96, 97. Everybody up there knows about it, about this case. And I think the thing with this was that I think that a lot of the psychics involved felt that she had done this because of her baby. That's what was giving her the energy was to keep her, find a way to keep her baby alive, which is interesting. But you hear these stories all the time. Like if you watch like Paranormal 911, there's 2 or 3 of those on there that are similar in other states, where they have found people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. The spirits are going to use what they can. And, they use technology. You've seen a lot of videos where they're talking through, the Alexa or through Siri, or, that sort of thing. And
right.
I had a experience, and it was a message from my mother, and it was the most amazing experience of my life. And it's kind of simple in its execution. But after my mother passed away, I started to get a little weirded out because I said, well, wait a minute, is my mother in heaven? Has she passed on? And is she trapped on the other side as I go? So, my paranormal experiences started to play in, like, was she safe on the other side? And I got I really got in my head about it. It was really weird, and I struggled. And I was at the gym one night, and I was telling my workout partner, and poor guy just listened to me. He's just like, I don't know what to tell you. That's a strange thing to think. I'm sure she's fine, kind of thing. And I said, all right. But he was very good about it. But anyway, I get home and I let the dogs out, and there's no TV on, there's no radio, there's no noise in the house. And I went to text him and just say, hey, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. I know I was kind of out there, So I hit the voice dictation, and the second I hit it, it beeped, and then it beeped right back off, like immediately. And I went to hit it again, but in that split second, it had actually recorded 2 words: Mom, good.
Great. Wow.
And I said, there's no way that's a coincidence after exactly what I was thinking about, what I just discussed, but some people say you chose to believe that. You're damn right I chose to believe it was my mom, because it gave me amazing peace. So, but that's how I was able to move on. But I truly was having trouble moving on. And I think that was my mom saying, let me give you a little help here. You need to get past this and focus on your life. And I thought, wow, what an amazing gift.
What happened? Well, something similar with me. When my mother passed, it was like 2 days afterwards. And I used to sleep on the couch because, of course, when you're taking care of older people, you don't know when you're going to have to go to the ER, So I would sleep in the clothes on my couch. And I woke up and she was sitting on the other couch where she always sat, sitting across from me. And just hanging out. And I woke up and she waved at me, and then she just disappeared. So she was telling me she was okay on the other side,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then there was another incident when she had her stroke, and she didn't want to go to the hospital that day. So we came home, put her to bed, and I woke up and I saw what looked like her standing in my divider area. And then they turned around and walked through the kitchen. So I followed this person through the kitchen. I mean, built exactly like my mom and everything. Go back, my mom's fine laying in bed. I don't know if it was it could have been one of my aunts, because the same build and everything. Or my mom just left her body to come check on me or whatever. I don't know what it was. But I definitely followed her down the hall, halfway disappeared.
There's a lot of reports, a lot of things I read about nurses, and a friend of mine, his wife is a nurse, and she used to work the graveyard. So she had a lot of crazy stories. But, a lot of times when they're close to passing, they talk about the family being there that had passed, an extended family being there. And, I hope that's true, because, to know you're passing, or, if they can feel they're passing, but there's someone there, they're like, okay, I have assistance. That's got to give them some comfort.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of hospitals, now, did you have any nurses or anything contact you or anything like that?
Yeah. So it was very interesting, because it wasn't just, policemen or EMTs. There were nurses, and there were folks that worked in long-term care facilities. that had experiences there as well. So there was one nurse who, and again, she was visibly upset about it, and didn't. It had been a recent occurrence, and I will say recent, probably in the last year and a half when I spoke to her, and she said, "Look, I'm just sharing this with you, but if you have any insight," and unfortunately, I didn't. I hadn't heard a story like that before, so I'll share it with you now. But there were two people in the same room, in the hospital room. They were sharing a room, and they were both not expected to make it. And there were a lot of specifics attached to it that are written in the book. But long story short is, when she entered the room, the bed closest to the door, she walked over and it was freezing. And we talk about that cold air, when there's entities around. Right. And the man was very troubled, and he was not expected to make it. So she didn't think much of it because he was obviously scared and upset. But he kept pointing to the ceiling, and he said, "It's trying to get me." And she's like, "What?" She said, "The demon's trying to take me. He's going to take me to hell. I've been a bad person," and that sort of thing. And of course, he was terrified, and so she's just tried to calm him down. And she got him calmed down. And then she went to the other man in the room. And as soon as she walked over past the curtain, it was like 10, 15 degrees warmer. And she's like, "What in the world?" And she thought the air conditioning was messed up on that side of the room, didn't think anything of that. Mm-hmm. And he's smiling, and he's got his, crucifix around his neck. And she's like, he's smiling. He's not expected to make it. These two came in the worst condition ever from, I think it was an awful accident. They should have been in the same room, but they were packed that night. It was just a crazy night. And she said, Are you okay?" And he goes, "I'm great." And he goes, I'm going to go to heaven. And he pointed up and he said, "There's an angel here to take me." And she's like, "Okay, this is crazy." So anyway, they both, neither of them made it. And months went by, and she gets a call to go to her room. And so she goes into the same room, and there's an elderly woman, and she's in the bed closest to the door. And again, it's cold on that side of the room. And she's like, "What is going on?" And the woman says, "Hey, you have me in the wrong place." And she's like, "No, ma'am, you're supposed to be here in this room." And she goes, No, I'm in the right room, but I'm in the wrong bed. I'm supposed to be in the one with the angel." And she points to the other bed. Oh, gosh. Yeah. And that whole night that she had completely pretty much forgotten about just came rushing back into her mind. Wow. And yeah.
Well, hospitals, there's just so much energy in there. I mean, it's not only sick people, but you got the families that are there that are worried about the sick people. So I would think that they would be extremely, extremely active.
I got to tell you, I'm not like overly dramatic, emotional guy, kind of thing. I mean, I you put a dog in front of me, then yeah, I collapse. I'll give you that. But on a day-to-day basis, I kind of deal with stuff, and I'm pretty level-headed, and I'm very left-brained. I actually take things in a very literal sense. And but I am open to the other side as well. Mm-hmm. And well, I lost my train of thought there for a second. So anyway, so I go to a hospital a year after my mother passed, and seeing my mother in the hospital for all that time, it was pretty bad. And I hadn't really gone to the hospital. So a year passed, and I had to go to the hospital for somebody else. And I walk into the hospital, and I walk into the room, and I literally was thrown back into when my mother was in the hospital, to the point where the person that was in the room was wearing the same gown. It was that same standard gown that they have. And the bells and whistles and the smells, I was shocked. I literally had to leave. I couldn't breathe. And I broke down in my car afterward. It took me back to that time. So, like you just said, the energy that's being put out, the sorrow, the pain, the frustration, the worry, the fear, it's all that. It's like, it's a thing, because I tapped it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It ruined me, steamrolled me, and I had to leave. And no one was more surprised than me, because I'm not that guy. I just don't. But yeah, that was so the energy is there. So, I hope our nurses and doctors are able to protect themselves some way, and maybe they say a prayer before and after they leave the hospital and keep themselves cleansed. I'm sure they found, whether it's healthy living and yoga, or I don't know, affirmations or something, just to keep themselves cleansed of that.
Because there's got to be an imprint, with all that energy, it's got to leave an imprint. And
that's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because that's what that's what I've learned, as a paranormal investigator that a lot of the time we're looking at imprints and replays over and over and over. But all that energy has to go somewhere, so the wood or whatever material the building's built out of sucks all that energy in.
Yep. And I think the energy, I think it works both ways too. So if you don't clear the energy, you don't clear the energy attached to that imprint, or clear the imprint if you can. I'm not sure. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about clearing an imprint. I'm not sure if that's something you can do. You can protect yourself from the energy of the imprint.
Right.
For sure. And of course not have it affect you, but I'm not sure that that's something that, you have to recognize it's there and then say, no, I won't let it affect me. I'll help cleanse it or just protect myself. And but that imprint, especially if it's a traumatic event, I mean, that's like walking through a storm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's people that are really sensitive to that. There's people that aren't really sensitive to that. Obviously you're a person that's sensitive to that. Walking into that, I am too. I get into a hospital and I get really overwhelmed, even at my clinic, because of the energy in there.
Yeah, and I am very sensitive to it, but I'm not to the point where I can say, okay, this is what's happening. It's A, B, and C, and it's this gender, and I'm not that guy. My friend Joni Mayhan, who I mentioned earlier before, she'll nail the color of their eyes, the whole 9 yards, and get the whole story. I just know something's not right.
Right.
And I'm also it's funny, I'm very influenced by the moon, so it always catches me by surprise. Not the full moon, but 2 days before the full moon.
Okay.
When it's waxing, when it's building its energy, I get weirded out. I can't think. I get foggy. If I'm having a conversation, I'll lose my train of thought like 2 or 3 times, and I'll be like, wait a minute, what's the full moon phase? And I'll look up the moon phase, and boom, 2 days before the full moon. But it's only like every couple of months it happens. So it always throws me because I always forget about it. And I always act surprised because I am surprised. So I forget that keeps happening to me. So there's some sort of moon, effect on me.
When somebody contacts you with a story, online, do you follow up with it and try to ask more questions of them, or do you just leave it to whatever information they give?
I do ask questions, and I'll get specifics to a point, but there's, they can't give out too much information. And I never ask for names or dates or anything like that. And I know what I can ask and what I can't ask at this point. And sometimes the story, actually most of the time, the story is just, I walked into a room, I saw somebody get slapped by an unseen hand in front of me, and their spouse stood across the room, nowhere near them, but somebody reported domestic abuse. And they're like, I saw it happen, but there was nothing else to the story. That was it. I witnessed it and then I left, so a lot of the stories are like that. They're not like these big dramatic build up and things like that. And so, Ghost Crimes is based on, inspired by these stories. I use the term based on, and someone said, well, they're true. And I said, no, they're based on true stories that I was communicated. And I said, well, maybe inspired is a better word. I'm not sure, but these things were told to me that they did happen. But I took liberties with them, so I took the core story, and of course I had to string it into a narrative. So I had to add characters and make things work. But, it's no different than, Amityville. Amityville said, the blood came down the wall, in the red room or whatever. Well, that scene is much larger than just blood falling, right? It was a whole production kind of thing. So there's an entertainment. So these are fictional books, but the stories are based on the experiences that were conveyed to me.
Well, of course you have to write your book, and you can't. If you wrote it straight out, the thing would come out, like an instruction book, because that's how police write things down. Hey, this happened to me, blah blah blah. Okay, next one, this happened to me. You know what I mean? So you've got to make it entertaining. So there's nothing wrong with that.
It was funny. Originally, my idea was I was going to take their stories and literally just plug them in and say, on this date this happened, and then the next story, just put a collection of stories.
Right.
And I said, and it wasn't until I talked to that detective, and I said, no, I need this guy to go through and all these experiences, and I need a support system, and I need him to heal. And I made sure that at the end of the first book, his healing process began. And in the second book, it's underway. And that was important for me because I thought he deserved it. And he's still going through experiences, and But I really wanted to tell these one-offs. I wanted to still tell these one-off stories. And I said, how can I do it? So in Ghost Crimes 2, I have Detective Burke is the main detective, and he's working through his stuff. But there's a support group for nurses and first responders to come and share those paranormal stories in a group that won't judge them. They're able to talk about them for the first time in many cases, get it off their chest, and feel better about themselves. So it's sort of an AA for paranormal trauma. And Detective Burke, and poor Detective Burke, he's a good guy, but he's socially awkward. He means well, but he doesn't say the right thing. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. So they all look to him as the paranormal expert because he went through so much. They know the first book story. So everybody thinks he's going to have an answer. And he's like, I don't have an answer. I can't tell you what happened. I appreciate your sharing it with me, but he does have little tidbits here and there. And so he's he's our unlikely hero, but he's got a lot more healing to do, but he's definitely underway.
Sounds interesting. Now my question too is that what kind of response did I mean? You put it out there that you were looking. I've done this before, where I put it out there on Facebook that I'm looking for stories from law enforcement and whatnot, and have gotten just trickles of response. What were your expectations when you put it out to the universe that you were looking for stories?
Honestly, my friend Joni had written a book called Signs of Spirits, and she was inundated with stories of loved ones that passed and the ways they communicated afterward. And whether they used animals or whether they used songs or signs or whatever. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And I have an idea. I'm still working on people's experiences with reincarnation and lives they've tapped into and putting that together. But so what my hope was that I would be inundated, and I wasn't. But I struck gold with the detective, because he's like, here's the first book is literally 4 of the stories came from him, and the first book is written in 6. I call them cases. So there's 6 chapters, but they're actually cases, and they all are tied together. But 2 of the cases came from elsewhere, and one was tied into my childhood of an event that happened on my street. But little by little, I got more stories, and again, I wanted to kind of say, okay. And then as people I know in my everyday life said, oh my God, I read Ghost Crimes. You need to talk to my friend, because he had an experience or she had an experience. And I'm like, rock on, have them DM me, let's do this. And I really prefer the DM thing, because that way I can say literally, this was our conversation, this is the story I took, and this is what I did. And I'd ask, are you okay if I embellish this or add that or tie it into this story? And they're like, yeah, whatever, I'm just telling you what happened, no explanation, here it is. So it wasn't overwhelming, but little by little, the word got out and I got more.
Do you think a lot of the reluctance is like I said earlier, that they don't want to be labeled a nut job or anything like that?
Well, you can't go back and say, hey, I went and checked into that complaint or that report, and it was a ghost. Oh, okay, well, I'll write that down. You're just not going to do that. There's got to be something else. And just because you can explain it doesn't mean it was supernatural or paranormal, right?
Right.
So there's that too. It's like there's something called an unexplained investigation. Those happen. We don't have the answers yet, right? So there's that too. But I think some of it is that, but more of it is like, I don't know what that was, but it didn't feel right. And so I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to figure it out. I don't want to say it happened. I don't want to say it didn't happen. I just don't want to deal with it anymore. Because if I acknowledge it, it's real. And everybody has their paranormal boundary, right? And especially, when I realized that they would come home with me, or I bought a house where there was an entity in there. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that there was another side to this, because in metaphysics, it was all connecting with your spirit guides, and it was channeling, and it was astral projection, it was reincarnation, and tapping into these other, and you're aligning your chakras, and you got a rock that's blue, and it's supposed to keep you positive all day in your pocket. It's all that kind of stuff. And then you realize there's another side to it, and that's where Ghost Hunters comes from, right? There's another side where they're chucking rocks at you and stuff like that.
I absolutely, I agree with you 100%. Let's do real quick before we end tonight. Talk about Ouija boards, because we kind of went over that. The thing I find scary about Ouija boards, and like you say, you got your Ouija board because they thought it was a toy, and that's the problem I see. I don't know where I saw it. I was at one of the bookstores, and they had a pink Ouija board for sale for girls. And you see this stuff all the time. In fact, I just saw one on TikTok the other day. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, has a Ouija board out.
Oh my gosh.
And people don't realize the dangers. They don't get it.
No. That's terrifying. And I was the same way. I didn't have one as a kid, but I had one later in life because the same allure. I can talk to people and all this. And no, it was, I don't know. I remember opening the lid to the Ouija board one day and feeling something kind of whisk by me, and all three of my dogs chased something invisible down the hallway.
That'd be enough for me.
And I said, well, I'm pretty sure I didn't let anything good in, So no more Ouija boards. No more.
It'd have been good. It would have stopped to say hi and pat you on the back.
Yeah, they didn't stop and there was no, how you doing, Gare? And that didn't happen.
Even as a ghost hunter, I wouldn't mess with that. I just wouldn't. I'm only, anytime I mess with any of that stuff, it's with my team there. I've got dowsing rods. It's cool, and I'm just making sure there's people there with me, psychic especially, to see what's going on. But the experience I've had with Ouija boards I just couldn't get over what got me, and I was younger messing around with it, was when the planchette moved by itself under my fingers. And I just thought, whoa, I don't know what this is. I'm not going to go there. But people don't realize danger. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, a friend of mine told me a story of a Ouija board when he was a kid. And I asked him, I said, can I use that? Because it was just such a good story. And I used it in my, I wrote a series of short stories called 7 Lessons. And it was focused mostly on reincarnation, but there was a Ouija board story in there. And I did not have to embellish. I mean, his story from beginning to end was absolutely terrifying. And they were all children. And, and this is a pretty, left brain guy, kind of thing. And, but yeah, he wanted nothing to do with them after that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, even as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid, I knew enough when that planchette started moving to go, oh no, I've had enough.
No.
Gare, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you coming. I was really excited to have you on because I've been looking, like I said, I have been putting the word out to the universe for law enforcement people to come forth with stories, and I struck out. So this was just perfect for me.
Yeah, I haven't asked for any more. I think at this point in Ghost Crimes, I've got enough to kind of continue to pepper the story, with some stories that I've gotten. But we're going to let the characters kind of create their own adventures going forward in the rest of the series, and organically, grow and have their experiences and work through their trauma. But congratulations on your podcast and everything you've done over the years, and and continuing your investigation of the paranormal and keeping the conversation out there and helping. I think when we talk, we help each other. You and I have helped each other tonight, just talking about our experiences with each other, with what we've had go on, and that's important. That we share this. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I appreciate it. Maybe we can get you on again sometime when you get your new books out.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you a copy. So shoot me an address so I can get you a copy of the Ghost Crimes.
Oh, that sounds great. I can't wait. All right. Thank you so much, and you have a good evening. I really appreciate it.
All right, you too. Thank you. All right, bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, I've been wanting to talk to somebody about law enforcement and first responders for a long, long time, and that was great. I'm going to make a quick announcement is that I'm going to be teaching 2 psychic development classes because I've had requests for classes. So I've got some dates finally scheduled. The first class will be Saturday, September 3rd at 5 p.m. Pacific. That's going to be the Psychic Development Class 1. And you can sign up over at the California Haunts Meetup. So just go to meetup.com and sign up, become a meetup member. There's no cost to it or anything like that. It's just you sign up. My meetup is free. And then that's where I schedule all my classes and stuff. The second class, if you've taken my Psychic Development Class 1 class, I also teach a Psychic Development Class 2. And that's going to be on Saturday, September 10th at 5 p.m. Pacific. So if you're interested in that, again, go to California Haunts Meetup. Just type in California Haunts Meetup; it'll come right up. And like I said, there's no cost to sign, to sign up to be a member of the meetup. Okay, it's just I charge for the classes because obviously, you know, this whole thing's funded by me. Just like that little ticker thing I have at the bottom says, so help me get exciting guests and stuff, and help me pay for my equipment and does all that good stuff. That's what I do the classes for as well. So if you feel like you might have psychic abilities, but you've never really used them yet, the first class is for you. Now, if you've gone through that, and that was weird. The screen flashed. Ooh, okay, leave me alone. If you've gone through that, and say you take my class and you think, hey, I think I'm doing okay with it. Psychic development too, because we take it to the next level to where we try to narrow down what your abilities are. Because psychics have different abilities. Not all psychics are alike. So this second class is where we try to narrow down what abilities you might have. So if you're interested in all that, check out CaliforniaHauntsMeetup.com, and you can sign up over there for the classes, okay? All right, again, if you're watching from Facebook and you like what you see, please hit that follow button. If you're watching from TikTok, please hit that follow button. And if you're watching from YouTube, please click on the little ghost down at the bottom right-hand corner with the magnifying glass and the Sherlock Holmes hat on. Okay, that's how you subscribe. I love it. I love having you guys here. It was great. It was fun. And tomorrow is Casual Friday with Nancy Matz. And we are going to be talking about space and time. What kind of space and time? Difference in time between here on Earth and what the time is like on the other side. All right? Because in some cases, and I don't know this for sure, so we're going to ask Nancy, we may think of a year as being a year. To them, a year is a mere minute. Right? It could be a mere minute or whatever, because their time is completely different. So we're going to talk about that. All right? When we see our loved ones, come to us, are they in our time or are they on their time? And how long they've been gone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. Like I always say, we're equal opportunity here. And we're trying to get the word out more and more about the show. YouTube shows us no love, so the more love the more people you can share with, the more love we're going to get from YouTube. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight, and I'm going to share Gare's information with you. And maybe you might want to get his books because they sound really interesting. So let me get the information out to you right now. And that's going to be website GareAllen.com, GareAllen.com. And I have 4 books for him listed, and here we go. You've got The Dead, a true paranormal story. And the second book is 7 Lessons. Third book, Ghost Crimes and Ghost Crimes 2. And you can find those on his website and, of course, at Amazon. Look at that, I timed that perfectly. Okay, well, I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a nice night.